Welcome to the Grow Podcast. I'm Pastor Mike with New Hope Network. We're here to help you take your next step in your relationship with Jesus. I'm so glad you're with us today.
What's up, New Hope family? Welcome to the Grow Podcast, episode 76. My name is David. I'm very glad that you joined us. With me, as always, is Pastor Mike Scorer. We're going last name today.
Wow.
Yeah,
I feel kind of formal.
I feel like, when a fancy host of anything introduces somebody, they do first and last name. Although you're known more just as Pastor Mike, not necessarily Pastor Mike Scorer, so maybe it would still be. I don't know. I'm thinking about it. We'll decide. Right. If we get 20 minutes into the podcast and I don't like it, we're going to restart. We're going to restart.
Episode 76 is it, and this is the beginning of the Christmas edition.
I mean,
if that helps you, Pastor Mike, if that helps you. Some
you did, yeah. If you're not
incredible, I was responsible for the decor today.
If you don't check out the video podcast, normally make sure that you check it out.
I'm such a home decorating kind of person. You can tell.
Realistic tree on our table. With some presents. Is there anything in those presents? Do I get to open those?
No, those presents were a gift from Family Ministry. They gave them to us for the podcast. So
if everybody listening at home thinks that Pastor Mike should probably bring me an actual gift that I could open up on a future podcast for the Christmas season. I mean, if you really love Christmas as much as you claim, you probably would have brought me a present today. I'm just saying.
I did bring you a present recently. It was, a Mountain Dew Zero probably.
I mean, I always accept those as presents. But yeah, we're our normal series. It seems just like our permanent series. The Greatest Story Ever Told, with all these different mini-series, is kind of on pause. Mm-hmm. Christmas season, the series is called Messiah. We kicked that off this last Sunday, assuming you're listening to this the week that it comes out. You're probably over the moon that you're now preaching on Christmas.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah.
And, but it is a challenge. Pastors talk about this a lot. It's like, I hear pastors say, it's the same story. How do we make this fresh every year? But I'm like, every story we teach on is a story, that we've been teaching on. But it is, we expect certain things every year. And I always want to try and bring a fresh approach to it. And I've never really run down in a teaching series why the Messiah matters. Messiah is so closely connected with Christmas. Obviously, it's because of the birth of the Messiah. Mm-hmm. But it's not something that we think of a lot when it comes to it in this day and age.
Sure.
It's like, oh yeah, that was Jesus. But, why does it really matter? So I enjoyed studying for this series and kind of bringing it down into understandable kind of terms for us. And we've really only teaching on it for 3 weeks, the 2 Sundays before Christmas, and then we come back on New Year's Day. Because for Christmas Eve, we've got something special cooked up.
Yeah, we do.
There's some fun stuff. And for Christmas Sunday, where we're online only everywhere, we have some special is a key word for it.
Yeah, with a variety of different meanings.
It's a variety of special. Yeah. And Pastor Andrea is going to team teach with me that day, so it'll be fun. But it'll be something for the whole family and just a little fun for Christmas Day.
And we won't be specifically live on Christmas Day with that. It will just be available on. So if your family wakes up at 7 a.m. and you want to watch it at 7 a.m. before you open presents or whatever, it will be there. It's not going to be just 9 and.
But there'll be something for the kids, something for the adults. There'll be some laughter, some fun.
Yeah, hopefully that's the plan.
Some music. I think
there is some music.
Yep,
there's some music in there. It's like we said, it's a variety. It's a variety show.
And I get to tell one of my most fun Christmas stories that I get to tell for that.
You said earlier that how does it get stale? We tell it, or how to keep it not stale. We tell it every year. I brought up some great stories during the Promised Land series here on the Grow Podcast that I'm guessing you've never preached on from the Bible. So I feel like if you're worried about getting stale, you just let me pick your sermon topics.
I've decided to have you make a list of those, and we'll bring in guest speakers for some of those.
I think those are the weeks you make Hattie and Pastor Jordan, Pastor Andrea, Pastor Kylie, all of our other pastors.
We'll bring in your dad, my friend Dr. Jim Dunn.
I like that.
my friend Pastor Wes Smith. We'll bring in some of that.
Next time Dr. Dunn is here, can I please pick what he preaches on? That would be a lot of fun.
That would be fun.
I would enjoy that a lot.
I'm sure as a president of a college, there are some things that he gets. Students.
Well, that could be a fun tradition that we could make.
I like that transition there. Way to go.
If you don't normally join us at New Hope here, that's the kind of transition you can expect from us at New Hope here.
Traditional transition. You like that?
But today we're going to talk about Christmas transitions. I don't think the
traditions.
We're going to talk about Christmas transitions. How to transition out of Christmas, because I'm already exhausted by it. I think this is the first time we've ever had a candle.
It is.
And it's a very strong scented candle.
Yeah.
So I think
it is.
It's really throwing me off.
That I think one of our boys got us. So our boys work in retail. They work in a company that sells candles. A company I would have never expected them to work for. But so we get candles all the time.
And you just hate it. It's just your least favorite.
I'm a little bit of a pyro, so I enjoy that.
It smells very nice.
I think this one's pecan waffle. I have another one called, I think this one's called, I have another one called 'Tis the Season. That was really good. That's like cinnamon and all those kinds of things.
I almost prefer the ones that don't pretend that they smell like the thing they're named after, like 'Tis the Season, and then it just tells you, these are the scents in it. But this doesn't smell like a pecan or a waffle. No. It smells nice.
It's nice.
But I didn't walk in the room and go,
pecan waffle.
Pastor Mike, are you making me pecan waffles for lunch today?
Now, for Thanksgiving, and I know you're a big
the greatest holiday that exists. Thanksgiving. Thank you for bringing it up. Let's talk more about Thanksgiving.
They found a candle at the company they work for called Thanksgiving dinner.
Is it one of the layered ones that has different scents?
Layers, and it's supposed to smell like all the different things in Thanksgiving dinner. So there was supposed to be stuffing. Mashed potatoes and gravy, turkey.
I can't imagine that's a nice smelling candle.
It wasn't awful.
Okay.
But it wasn't awesome.
Did it end with pumpkin pie?
I don't know we didn't get that far.
Yeah.
And I noticed because we had Thanksgiving dinner at Kylie's youngest sister, and I noticed she told the boys, "You can take that home with you."
This is our candle cast.
Yeah.
But those layered ones, I feel like once you burn from one layer into the next, instead of just, now it smells like the next layer, now it smells like an amalgamation of the two layers. And then you hit the third layer together. And you're just like, what is this? What is this supposed to be?
You have to choose those layered ones carefully to make sure the smells good.
I'm not a fan. I don't trust those. But instead of spending another 20 minutes on candles.
Candles are a tradition.
Oh, there we go.
You like that?
Wow, that was a great New Hope Here style tradition.
There you go.
We're going to talk about Christmas traditions today. Because I think a lot of people have those. And sometimes they can be even painful, right? If we had a Christmas tradition and then we've lost somebody and they were tied to that tradition, or even just we've moved. I know that's one thing for us when we moved, and sometimes spending Christmas not with our family before, and then you miss out on those traditions. So there's a lot that goes with.
Do you have a favorite Christmas tradition?
I
didn't prepare you for that.
I don't know if I have a favorite. I have there's things I remember from when I was a kid. Then there's things that we've tried to continue on now with our kids. I loved the little Advent calendar we had. We didn't do we didn't get gifts when I was a kid with our Advent calendar. It was just this little plastic or paper, just the story of Christmas. But it was just fun to do every day. My sister and I each had one, and we would always open those up. So that was a good one. I love that in my family, we do Christmas presents on Christmas Eve. So we would always have the Christmas, as Jesus intended when he was born.
By the way, here's a tradition that I do every year in my Christmas Eve message, and I only do this at the in-person ones. I survey the audience. Christmas Eve Christmas Day, and it divides the room. So I just create some division.
Create a lot of division on Christmas Eve. That's great, Pastor
And
Mike.
Kids are going, wait, nice. Christmas Eve is an option?
Oh, I didn't even think about that. You probably those Christmas morning parents are probably furious.
Yeah,
I like the idea in theory of you wake up Christmas Day and you run down. But we do stockings Christmas morning. So then you still have that Christmas morning.
And we save a big one for Christmas morning. We call it our Santa gift. Okay. So the big, more expensive, or sometimes just doesn't have to be more expensive size. And then stockings we do. Yeah. That kind of thing. the older you get, the smaller those are, but the more expensive they are.
Yeah.
It's like a gift card. It's far more expensive than that big one.
I gotta say one, because I hope my mom and dad end up. I know my dad usually listens, and my mom listens often as well. It's not a tradition because it only happened once, but so being a pastor's kid, Christmas Eve is a chaotic day, as obviously you're aware as a pastor. It's not a relaxing day spent with family necessarily. It's usually a busy, hectic day, and so our Christmas Eve dinner would just vary. Like some years my mom might have time and she would try to make something, and some years she wouldn't, and we would just have whatever. And there's like a distinct year that we still talk about in our family where we had Arby's for Christmas Eve. And we weren't like destitute or anything, but we didn't eat out very often growing up. And so I was young. I was like, this is fantastic. Curly fries and a roast beef sandwich. Let's do this every year. So we still talk about the Arby's Christmas Eve dinner. It was a good one.
That's funny. Yeah.
What about you? Do you have, I know you said as a preacher, but what about with family? Do you have a?
I think our favorite, and we don't do this like every year, a lot of it just because of timing, is I love those moments on Christmas Eve when we have certain foods that we have, like we do, what are they called? The little hot dogs that we wrap and make. What are they called? Yeah, what are they called, producer?
Pigs in a blanket.
Pigs in a blanket. Thank you. So we do little ones, and then like barbecue meatballs, and then we have far too much sugar.
Well, right.
That's peanut butter fudge, chocolate mint fudge.
I just thought of another one. Please continue.
Yeah, and all those kinds of things. And we just munch while we. Normally, the youngest would sort all the presents out and make them up in little piles.
Yeah, that's probably one of mine too. Is the kids are always the elves, so they're the ones who disperse the presents. So they go into the tree. Oh, this one's for Grandma. Bring it over to Grandma. This one's for Papa. So that's always really fun. I think Christmas cookies are a big one for me, and they weren't really growing up. Like we always had Christmas cookies. My mom would make like her fudge. We always had her fudge there. But a lot of the cookies we had in my house when I was really little were just given to us by people in the church, and I think my mom would make a few. But when we moved when I was in 10th grade to the church where I ended up meeting my wife, and we've talked about my friend Dan and his girlfriend Bridget that had passed away, but Dan's mom, who you've met now and a lot of our staff have met, is the single greatest cookie maker in human history, and her Spritz cookies are the greatest cookies on the planet. And so eating those every year was like my favorite, because my mom would go make cookies with her. They became friends, and then when I moved, she would ship them to us. We moved to Oklahoma, and she would send cookies to Oklahoma for me. And then we moved here, and she was still sending cookies.
Didn't she just bring some to you when we were visiting?
When we were in Minnesota, she had a big container of Spritz cookies for me. And so Val Battis's Spritz cookies are
one of the favorite
favorites.
traditions and dangerous traditions is we spend, at least the last several years, we spent Christmas Day and a couple days at Kylie's folks' house. So they have a ranch in Nebraska. And Karen, Kylie's mom, there's this kind of sideboard about the size of this table. Yeah. And it's like 4 layers, so all the way up. And she and every family brings stuff, just stack that full. And I mean, it's full of Christmas candies and desserts and things. And so every time you walk by, you're like, oh, yeah, I'll just take one little thing. And pretty soon, 50 pounds later, it's a great Christmas tradition.
It's such a good one.
Here's a question. This is a transition, right? You ready for this? What is a tradition?
Are you wanting me to answer this? Do you want me to try to give like a dictionary definition, or?
Yeah. How do you know something is a tradition?
I think it has to be something that's meaningful and consistent. So, like the Arby's thing that I brought up wasn't a tradition because it happened one time. It's more of a fun memory. Yeah. But so it has to be, I would say it has to be meaningful and repeatable to be a tradition.
I think there's 2 kinds of traditions. Ones that we enjoy, that just produce good feelings, remind us of things. And they aren't wrong, necessarily. I think in Scripture, actually, when we go back, and we've been looking in this series, when we go back in the book of Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers, God began what we would call traditions. When you read them, they were listed as rules and laws. But really, they were traditions. And a good tradition is one that reconnects you and reminds you of something that matters. And you could call it a spiritual discipline. Yeah. I think there are times we need to just be reconnected to what matters and and reminded of things. But we can turn traditions into not so good things too.
Yeah.
Where they turn into legalism.
We're actually pretty good at that as human beings.
and in the church world, especially this time of year, it's like, we need to sing a new fill-out song, this kind of song, and it has to only be sung this way, even though we don't listen to that style of music any other time during the year. And if we don't do it, somehow we aren't spiritual. So we need to be very careful with that. And Jesus actually warned us of that. He was talking to the Pharisees in Matthew 23. He says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you're hypocrites, because you clean the outside of the cup and the plate, but inside they're full of greed and self-indulgence. You blind, first clean the inside of the cup and plate, that the outside may also be clean. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, for you're like whitewashed tombs." He was a really gentle guy sometimes, which outwardly appear beautiful. And you say, well, that doesn't say anything about traditions. But when you read that whole passage, he's talking about repeating things that they do that they use as used as measurements of their spirituality.
Sure.
And that's where tradition can become dangerous, is when we use them as measurements of our spirituality or measurements of our experience. God really didn't show up unless we do that tradition. Really? Because God is a God of new things. It's not always the tradition. So we have to be really, really careful with that.
So you're kind of separating like Val's Christmas cookies from like spiritual
traditions. Which is a great tradition.
But then there's like the spiritual side. So then in that, then there's subcategories of the spiritual ones. There's the good, there's the bad ones like we just talked about. So what is it? Which is that's fun, Pastor Mike.
The producer, my vest is.
Are you swishing around? Yeah. That's great. That's great for everybody at home.
Yeah,
Pastor Mike wore a swishy vest today. Just kind of really rub it against the microphone there. That's nice back home. Merry Christmas, everybody. So you got these two kinds of spiritual traditions. Thanks for starting with the bad one. That's really fun, Pastor Mike. What does a good one look like? What does it look like to have a good, healthy spiritual tradition?
A good one, again, it reminds and reconnects. So think about it, and let's just use Christmas. Whether you like Christmas music or not, we probably all have a favorite Christmas song. There's
Christmas in the Sticks by No Big Deal.
Yeah.
Look it up right now. He's a Christian artist, and it's the greatest Christmas song of all time. That's No Big Deal, DYL, period. Christmas in the Sticks. Okay. Greatest Christmas song ever.
Actually, just a little bit of teaser. If you're listening to us the week this is released, this coming weekend, I start the message talking about
Christmas
the most popular Christmas songs, and you
with
can look
some interesting information about.
Yeah, about
I'm not going to say anything about it, but it was
don't spoil it.
That was not.
But
I didn't know
think
any
a
of it.
great tradition does connect with us emotionally, or stirs up a memory or something, and it reminds us of something important and reconnects us. Think of communion, the Eucharist. It is a sacrament, but it was designed to do what? To remind us of what Jesus did for us, and to reconnect it for us to Jesus. And we actually experience God's grace in that moment. So I think this time of year especially, traditions can help. Because what? Because it gets so busy. I think of a pastor's house. You grew up in a pastor's house, but it's true for all of us.
It is, yeah.
And it's so easy to get through this, and this is why depression often hits in January, February, not just in the north where we don't see daylight, or
Isn't
warmth.
It great?
No, it's not. We all need vitamin D. But a lot of times we experience tradition is because we rushed through a time that was intended to reconnect us and refill us and restore us. And that's why I think traditions matter.
How do I differentiate? You said a good tradition can remind us of things and connect us to things. But I feel like something can remind me of things and connect me to things, but that doesn't mean I'm not being legalistic with it. It doesn't mean I'm not using and I would argue especially in the church world, a lot of church tradition reminds us of things, and might connect us to the, to, I remember, this with grandma back in the day or whatever, or even just connecting me to the church of the past. It doesn't mean that they're healthy things. It doesn't mean that there's something that
I think we need to be very careful that it's not self-centered.
Okay.
because, it's like, I demand, and we've all heard probably stories, I demand that the church sing this song. And why? It's all about a memory you have.
Mm-hmm.
And what do? We project that on everybody else, because it means something to me. It means something to you. It may not mean anything to you.
Yeah.
So a good church tradition is one that the community can share in together, that connects you to one another, that maybe gives some structure. And by the way, it's not a comprehensive list, but like a list of things that good, healthy traditions do. They connect you to other people. They'll give structure and slowness during a season that is busy. They just help you press pause. Sometimes a good tradition will cultivate awe. And we don't think about it because awe only happens when we pause. Awe doesn't happen as we're rushing through. You've got to think about something in order to be awestruck by it, right? Got to pay attention to it. A good tradition can connect us with our past in a healthy way or in an unhealthy way, right? But it's a good tradition is a great way to pass down stories of the faith. Think of that like reading the Christmas story with your kids. It's a great way to pass down stories of the faith. It can also, and I talked about this earlier, help us experience God's grace. But I think we need to remember, traditions don't have to be traditional.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when we think of tradition, we tend to think of old and whatever. It's just, I think you defined it well at the beginning. It is something we repeat that has meaning. And I think a good tradition is something we repeat that connects us and reminds us of who God is and our connection with him. And you can come up with a new tradition in all kinds of ways. I mean, an old tradition is one we use around New Hope, is the Advent wreath. I'm actually going to be talking about it on Christmas Eve. And it's a great tradition. You can look it up. And it just reminds you and connects you that Jesus is at the center of things. But there's some cool other ones we can talk about.
Yeah. Do you think let's say I don't have a lot of traditions, maybe tied to Christmas. Is that something I should seek out? Like, should I try to actively create a tradition, or does a tradition need to be something that just kind of happens naturally?
I think they can happen both ways. I think the best traditions are intentional, and they don't just have to happen at Christmas time. I mean,
for sure. We're just talking in the context of Christmas.
But intentional, because you want them. you want a few, not a ton, but you want a few traditions that will intentionally reconnect you and refill you and cause you to pause this time of year. One of my I've got two Christmas traditions that I rarely compromise. I'm not legalistic about it, but I rarely compromise. One is I take at least one night. In fact, increasingly, I try to do it more often, where I stay upstairs in our house where after everybody goes to bed and every light goes off except the Christmas lights, like the lights of the Christmas tree. I might light a couple candles or two. And I just sit. And I sit there, longer than is maybe comfortable. And I just pause and just enjoy the moment. No agenda other than that, but that has become one of the most meaningful times of the year for me. Another one that's a little bit more fun is I both read, well, it's not both. There's three things. Read, I listen to, and I watch every version of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol I can possibly get my hands on. Yeah. Some of them good, some of them not so good.
Do you still... I've never asked you this before, because I know that you love A Christmas Carol. Yeah. If let's say there's a new one and it's just awful, do you still then try to watch that one the next year?
There's one or two that I've just
that you just don't need that one anymore.
Like there was one, I'm trying to remember who the actor is. It was called Scrooged. Came out in the 90s, 80s, 90s. Okay. Famous actor was in it.
I don't know if
I don't watch that one every year. It's just kind of cheesy, but it's similar. There's a new one out this year, kind of new version that I'm interested to watch, but I haven't seen it yet.
Is that the Will Ferrell and Ryan Reynolds one?
Spirited?
I think Joanna watched it. It looks good.
But I've already my all-time favorite is Patrick Stewart did A Christmas Carol, very true to Charles Dickens, and I've already listened to it. He reads it word for word and does all the voices, and I've already listened to it twice in this Christmas season, and then I've started to watch it because I watch it normally a couple times. my best. I mean, that's my favorite. Just kind of meaningful. But the best Christmas Carol. You know what I'm talking about, because we did it at Christmas at the movies last year.
It's so good.
What is it?
It's a Muppet Christmas Carol.
Christmas
it's
Carol.
Just brilliant.
Yeah.
Did you watch the one? Was it 2 or 3 years ago? That was on. I think it was on FX.
I started
Tom
to watch
Hardy
it, and there was parts of it. I was like,
it's intense. It's an intense version of it.
Yeah.
I loved it. I think it was Tom Hardy.
It was like a series.
To look it up who it was.
Miniseries.
Miniseries. Yeah, the Muppet one is just unbeatable. When the little rat is used to, I think we made sure to have it in the Christmas of the movies, and then he uses him to clean the window and drops him, and he just goes, "Thank you for including me in that." I lose it every time.
That's a message in a series. That whole series, I wish we could have left up, but for copyright reasons, we couldn't, just because there was so much meaning in it. But I know you're the one that normally watches time.
We'll be wrapping up.
I want to give us some ideas for some intentional traditions for you, both for individual and for family. So we've talked about some. Find a meaningful story that takes you into it. Mm-hmm. I think it needs to be biblically. I don't think it needs to be biblically grounded, but it doesn't necessarily need to be a biblical story. Like A Christmas Carol is biblically grounded in so many ways.
Sure, in the
ghost side of it is not.
Right, but in the heart of what they're trying to teach you, the message of it. Yeah,
so many ways. And there's some others. Even crazy Christmas movies like Elf or National Lampoon Christmas Vacation, which there's parts of that aren't super family friendly. But there's a heart of a Christmas message in both of those, and I think that's good. So find movies and watch them and talk about them.
While we're on movies, as the Christmas expert, is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
I've always weighed in on yes. It's a Christmas movie.
Interesting. I honestly would have thought you would go the other direction. Okay, good to know. There you go.
No.
I don't know if that one's biblically grounded or not.
There's not a whole lot of biblically grounding on that. I think the nativity. We actually have multiple nativity sets in our house, and don't just use them as decoration, especially if you have young kids like you. Take some time, have them involved in setting it up. Yeah. Maybe read the Christmas story, talk about who was there and what it would have. Engage your children's imagination. Yeah. And by the way, adults, engage your own imagination. What would have been like to have been there?
Yeah.
I think that's a good one.
We have a really great one with our kids. It's their Advent calendar, but I don't know if it's felt, but it's kind of like those old flannel graph things almost. And so every day, like on day one, they get to take one of the characters out and add it into the nativity. And so then we get to talk about that character and what, that part of it.
And
so
I've seen that
really
there's some nativities that you can get where you add different ones.
Yeah, it's really
the nice. Advent wreath is that way. We actually, at New Hope on our social media every week, it started the week after Thanksgiving, we're posting an Advent reading that you can do and, by yourself or with your family. Take times, like I just talked about, where you shut off all entertainment and games and just pause, listen. Depending on where you live, this is one that I did when we lived in California because it was a little bit easier than where I live now. And this is weird because this sounds counterintuitive than what I'm saying. I would go to the mall. Now, it sounds very consumeristic or whatever, but I would go to the mall, I'd get my favorite drink, and I wouldn't buy a thing. I would just go in the middle of the mall and I would just sit. And I'd sit there for an hour and just enjoy watching people, where it's an intentional disconnection from the consumerism, even though I'm in the middle of it, but watching and realizing, especially it reminds me, and part of this, it helped me prepare as a pastor, that person needs Jesus, that person needs Jesus. Another one is as a person or as a family, have the practice of what we call first gift. Give the first gift. This sounds like something from the Grinch or the first gift. But give the first gift to Jesus, since he was the one who gave himself as a gift to you. And I know some families actually have a present they open as they do that. Or they'll say, we're going to give a financial gift beyond and above this year. Some families, that first gift is they choose someone. I actually have a couple of families who come to us as a church and say, is there a family that is in need? And we want to give our first gift to that family in some way. Okay, this one sounds absolutely the opposite of Christmas. Fast. Give up a meal.
If that meal is ham, a Christmas ham, that's an easy one for me. I'll skip the ham.
By the way, ham or turkey, come Christmas Eve, because we're going to talk about ham or turkey on Christmas Eve. I'm giving all kinds of previews for Christmas Eve.
Which, Italian, neither. Italian.
But fast. I mean, what is fasting? Fasting is giving up something so that you can pay attention to something more important, and that's important.
How do I make sure when I'm fasting, and real brief, we're not going to do a whole podcast on fasting, that I don't just sit and be angry that I'm hungry, but I actually am being.
That's one of the reasons why it's the most difficult spiritual discipline for me. I have a friend of mine who it's constant for him. It's where he lives, and one of my mentors. And I'm still working on this, but the key for me and for others that they've talked about is when you begin to feel that feeling of I'm hungry or I'm ticked off that I'm not eating, fudge right now or whatever, is to intentionally use that as a cue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is a cue. This is a signal.
Yeah.
I'm going to pause right now.
Yeah.
And come back to the Lord. I think decorations, can be annoying or fun, but use decorations to remind you of the life of Jesus. We've done some teaching on this. I've done some teaching at other times of the Christmas tree. No, it wasn't distinctly didn't start as a Christian symbol, but there's a lot of Christian symbolism in it. It points us to Jesus and the green for everlasting and eternal life, all those kinds of things. But also have some specific decorations that you use, kind of like the nativity.
What about the 50-foot blow-up Santa Claus that I see outside of Walmart every day?
I'm not sure how to have that one help you. Yeah.
If you woke up one morning and that was in your front yard because somebody that you may work with had put it there, would you be happy or unhappy about that?
I'd be ecstatic. That would be fun. Yeah, that'd be so much fun. And I think a big one is find time to share stories. Whether you write them down or hang out with your small group or whatever, just share stories of God's work. That's a great way to end a year, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, what did God do in your life this year? And share the stories. The key, I think, to a great tradition this kind of year is one that slows you down.
Mm-hmm.
Slows you down and lets you pay attention. So reconnect and remind.
Well, that was good, Pastor Mike. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Thanks to all of you for being here as we, Pastor Mike mostly, and I just mostly talked about our favorite traditions, but I think Pastor Mike had some teaching in there for us too. But yeah, let's make sure, focus on the traditions you have, being intentional with them, and then look for different ways to add those good traditions that add good things to our spiritual life, not the way that they can be negative and become legalistic and things. And we will continue. It's more Christmas chat next week here on the Grow Podcast. So make sure that you join us next week. Make sure you're joining us at one of our campuses too on Sundays. So either in Tioga or in Williston or at our online campus, New Hope here, because this Messiah series is really great. And then Pastor Mike promoted a little bit, but Christmas Eve, make sure you're going to be there. And make sure you're inviting someone who you're going to bring to Christmas Eve with you. So be inviting people. And again, even if online is where you'd be, invite somebody to join you. Invite your neighbor to come over to your house and watch it with you, or your family, or whatever that is. So make sure you're thinking about who you're going to be inviting to join you for Christmas Eve. It's such a great opportunity to invite someone. And I know there's statistics that go into it, but the likelihood of somebody being willing to say yes to going to church is so much higher on Easter and Christmas Eve than it is the rest of the year.
80 to 90% higher than any other time of the year.
It's crazy. So, I am very confident that God's putting somebody on your heart to be inviting. So make sure you're inviting that person. And then join us again next week on the Grow Podcast. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe. Get notified when the new episodes go live. Leave us a comment, a like, anything like that. We love you, New Hope family, and we will see you next time.